disclaimer in here, looking at page 16 of our yellow packet for your Algebra 1 best end of course exam using Florida's best standards. Number 34. What is the value of the x squared term when 4x squared minus 3 plus 1.5x is multiplied by negative 2x minus 6? So I've got to multiply these polynomials to get started. So I'm going to switch these two around, actually. So this is still equivalent, right? 4x squared plus 1.5x minus 3. I like to always have my variables before my plain number there. So negative 2x minus 6, 4x squared, 1.5x minus 3. So let's see where we wind up with x squares when we're multiplying these. 4 times negative 2 is negative 8. X squared times x is x to the power of 3, not it. But 4x squared times negative 6 will give us an x squared. So we're going to have 4 times negative 6, positive times negative is a negative. 4 times 6, 24x squared. And then 1.5x times negative 2, positive times a negative is a negative. And 1.5 times 2 would be 3. And x times x is x squared. So we found another x squared here. And I'm going to continue multiplying just to make sure those are my only two x squared terms that got to get combined. 1.5x times negative 6, positive times negative. Negative 1.5 times 6. Pretty sure that's 9. 1.5 times 6. 6 times 5 is 30. 6 times 1 is 6 plus 3, 9. With, 1 behind the decimal. So negative 9. And then only the 1x. And then negative 2x times 3. Negative times a negative becomes a positive. 2 times 3 is 6. And just the 1x. And then negative 3 times negative 6. Negative times a negative is a positive. 3 times 6 is 18. So our x squared terms, we're only looking at negative 3 and negative 24. So the signs are the same. So you would add them. So negative 3 plus negative 24 is going to be negative 27 is what would be with your x squared. And if you want to practice some more questions similar to this standard for your Algebra 1 EOC Florida Best Standards, I would recommend IXL Lesson W, R5, and 5, 8A. That's 2 different lessons on IXL. And don't forget to use your district Clever login when doing your lessons on IXL so that I can see what you've done. And moving on to number 35. You rent a paddleboard at the beach. The cost for the paddleboard is $30 plus $4 per hour. You can only rent a paddleboard for a maximum of 4 hours. Create a graph that represents the linear relationship between the price Y and the number of hours you can rent the paddleboard X. What would be an appropriate range for the situation? And range, right, is asking, what are your Y values? And then to graph this, right, your cost is your price, right? Your cost is your Y. So we can say, right, that Y, the cost equals the $4 per hour, where X is the hours you rent X. So it's costing 4X and then plus a $30 fee. Create a graph that represents the linear relationship. So here we go. It's never going to cost you negative money. They're not going to not charge you, and you can't rent a paddleboard for negative hours. And actually the maximum hours, right? You could rent it for 0 hours, 1, 2, 3, up to 4 hours is the maximum. After that, the domain is only from 0 to 4. And the range, when X is 0, our Y-intercept is going to be $30. These go by 10. How about if they go by 5? 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. 0 hours costs you $30. And then 35, 40, 45, 50, 55. Okay, so if you rent it for 1 hour, it's going to be 4 times 1 plus 30, it'll be $34. If you rent it for 2 hours, 4 times 2 plus 30, 4 times 2 is 8 plus 30, $38. And you can rent it for 3 hours, 4 times 3 is 12, plus 30 is $42. Or you could rent it for the maximum of 4 hours, 4 times 4 is 16, plus 30 brings us up to $46. So at 4 hours, it's costing $46. So our range goes between $30 to $46. $30 is the least amount for your Y. and 46 is the maximum. And they didn't ask, but we can just say that their domain, the x values, would go from 0 up to 4, because 4 is the maximum amount of hours, and it wouldn't make sense for it to be less than 0. And actually, you wouldn't rent it for 0 hours and say, okay, I want to rent this paddleboard for 0 hours and pay you $30 for nothing. So really, it would be greater than 0 if we're trying to make this make sense, right? And really, I guess we wouldn't put a or equal to under there, so really you'd be paying more than $30 realistically. So I would take that little line out there, and you'd pay a maximum of $46. And to practice the standard, I will recommend lesson AW7 in IXL. And then number 36 is the last question on this page. The height in feet of an object launched from a slingshot is represented by the function below, where x is the horizontal distance traveled by the object. Find and interpret the x and y intercepts in context. So my f of x is my y, and my y-intercept I can find pretty quick, because this has an x, this has an x. So if those were 0, it would be negative 1/16 times negative 300. And if we put that over 1, right, because that's a whole number, we can put over 1 if we want to. Then we got negative 300 over negative 16. And a negative divided by a negative is going to turn to a positive, so those cancel each other out. And then when you divide that on a calculator, you get 18.75 for your y-intercept. And now for our x-intercept, when x is 0, we can, numbers got, multiply to 300, multiply to 30, and add to 5.5, 55. I'm going to go and use the quadratic equation, quadratic formula, which they do give you on your reference sheet. So that's where I'm going, which is, so x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. So I can plug in, right, where this is ax squared plus bx plus c ax squared plus bx plus c. So my a here. I'm not concerned about this -1/16. I'm just going to factor this in here. I'm just going to do that. So I'm going to erase where I see an A and plug in a 1. And where I have B, I'm going to put -55. So that's minus negative, so that's positive 55. And 55 squared, -55 squared. It's going to turn positive anyway, so that negative can go away. Equals, oh, and then for C, I'm going to plug in that 300. -300 equals. Now, I've got 55 plus or minus the square root of 55 squared minus 4 times 1 times -300, so that'll be plus 1200. And I'm just going to put all of that on the calculator, and I want you to do that as well. And when I do that, I get 4,225 over 2 times 1 is 2. And now when I put this in, I get 55 plus this, and divide by 2, x equals 60, or x equals minus -5. And so I have my two values for x, for my x-intercepts of the graph, but we got to make it make sense, right? I highlighted up there in green, x is the horizontal distance traveled by an object, and I can't have my x be -5. It just doesn't make sense for that distance to be negative, right? When you're launching from the slingshot and it's starting the y-intercept, it's starting there at 18.75 whatevers. So it's gonna hit the ground at 60. So we're gonna use this for the x-intercept, and this goes away because it just doesn't make sense. X-intercept. Find and interpret the x and y intercepts in context. So we did it, we made it make sense. And for more practice on this standard in IXL, I've got lesson Y, J, Z. And I hope that this has been helpful to you and a good use of your time getting ready for your algebra and, of course, exam. You make me so proud. Keep it up, Cobra. Bye.